Ladies and gentlemen, in case you're wondering, here's an update. In the Oregon National Guard case from Attorney General of the state of Oregon, Dan Rayfield. Let's get into it. On Monday, 10/20, today, ladies and gentlemen, a Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals panel stays the first TRO. Briefing is requested as to whether the full Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals should hear the case. Government asked District Court to resolve second TRO. A panel of the Ninth Circuit judges pauses the District Court's first temporary restraining order, which prevents Oregon National Guard from being deployed to Portland shortly after a Ninth Circuit judge called for a vote on whether the full court should hear the case and vacate the panel's decision. The court has asked the parties for a briefing on whether it should do so. In the meantime, the federal government has asked the district court to dissolve, ladies and gentlemen, not resolve, dissolve the second TRO, which currently prevents the federal government from deploying any state's guard in Oregon. Meanwhile, ladies and gentlemen, in Illinois, the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals keeps a similar TRO in place for now. The federal government seeks a stay of that TRO from the Supreme Court on 10/16. Ladies and gentlemen, the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals unanimously keeps in place a similar TRO preventing deployment of the Illinois National Guard into the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois, ladies and gentlemen. The federal government then filed a stay application in the Supreme Court, asking the court to immediately pause the TRO. The Supreme Court asked Illinois to file a response by 10/20 and may rule quickly. Ladies and gentlemen, what's next? Well, here's what's next. This is a rapidly evolving situation. The Oregon Department of Justice will continue to defend the Constitution and the rule of law and share updates when we have them. Keep note, ladies and gentlemen, that this is current as of today, Monday evening, October 20, 2025. And just so you know, ladies and gentlemen, again, in case you guys are saying that no judge called for a vote, the answer is wrong. Yes, a Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals judge has called already for a vote on whether the case involving the deployment of the National Guard to Portland should be reheard by the full court. The request follows a 3-judge panel's decision on October 20, 2025. Today, ladies and gentlemen, that illegally allowed the Trump administration or Trump and company, the federal government, which heard with President Trump, ladies and gentlemen, which sided with President Trump illegally. And it is illegal because there is no rebellion or insurrection or threat of a rebellion on the ground in Oregon. Portland, Oregon, that is. Ladies and gentlemen, my editorial edition. And overturned a lower court's restraining order blocking the deployment. Ladies and gentlemen, here are some key details. Ladies and gentlemen, the judge's call for an in-bank review was made by Senior Ninth Circuit Judge Sidney R. Thomas. An in-bank review, ladies and gentlemen, involves a larger panel of the court's judges. In this case, 11 judges rather than the original 3. Ladies and gentlemen, here is the basis for the review. If you might be asking yourselves and about to ask this question in the comments, well, what's the basis for this review? Well, I'm about to tell you. Here it goes. Judge Thomas's call was prompted by the dissent written by Judge Susan Graber, who disagreed with the 2-1 panel majority's decision. Ladies and gentlemen, you might be asking yourselves, well, what's the brief on the filing? Let's get into that. The parties involved, including the state of Oregon, have until midnight on Wednesday, October 22, 2025, to submit briefs supporting or opposing the in-bank review. Your team's brief would be part of the process. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm about to go over Oregon's position in the matter. Oregon's Attorney General Dan Rayfield has publicly urged for the full Ninth Circuit Court to act swiftly to vacate the majority's order. The deployment, ladies and gentlemen, of the status you may be asking of the 200 illegally, unconstitutionally, for no reason, deployed, excuse me, federalized National Guard members' deployment status. On what that is, well, I'm about to tell you. While the panel's ruling allows for the deployment, a U.S. Northern Command spokesperson stated that the National Guard soldiers in Portland are not conducting any operational activities at this time. State versus federal authority, ladies and gentlemen, I'm about to tell you the difference. The case addresses a core conflict over state and federal authority, particularly concerning a president's power to deploy the National Guard over a governor's objection. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for this legal breaking reporting video analysis update. If you did enjoy this legal breaking reporting video analysis update, please firstly like, comment, share, subscribe, and enjoy. Secondly, if you would like to make sure you're always up to date on all the things legal breaking reporting wise on the side of politics, please hit the bell icon as well as the all notification option. There is no paywall, no nothing. In the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, you guys can do so. You guys can keep up to date by following me on my social medias that will be linked down below in the video description. In the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, please subscribe for more. Follow along for all the more legal breaking news you need to know about. More to come soon.